doing that on my own was super weird. It was very, very weird. Anyway, it's DCTR, which stands for Two's Company, Three's a Podcast, Does the Cinema. And this is where we get to check out a film that's currently in theaters. Whether it's new or not, it doesn't really matter. If it's still out and there's nothing else that we want to see that we haven't seen already, we'll go find a film and we'll go watch it and we'll review it. Now, this week's review, as you would have seen for those watching on YouTube in the title and the thumbnail, for those listening at home on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and of course YouTube, Big Summer Blowout, if you've seen the description, today we're talking about Blumhouse's Fantasy Island. Now, I wish my co-host was here to review this with me because he knows more about Fantasy Island, the previous series more than I do. All I can really talk about is this film. Now, I have written a few bits and pieces regarding this film, but let's get down to the nitty-gritty regarding who wrote it, who directed it, what's it starring, what's the premise. First of all, the film is called Blumhouse's Fantasy Island, not just Fantasy Island. And that's a very interesting thing because the opening of the film and at the very end, when the title comes up as Fantasy Island, it legitimately says Blumhouse's Fantasy Island. I thought that was very cool. A very good way to distinct this one from the other versions of Fantasy Island that we know of. Directed by Jeff Wadlow, written by Jeff Wadlow, Chris Roach, and Gillian Jacobs, starring Michael Pena, Maggie Q, Lucy Hale, Austin Stowell, and Michael Rooker, who you would recognize as Yondu from the Guardians of the Galaxy movies or as Merle from The Walking Dead. That's where I knew him from anyway. Distributed by Sony Pictures Releasing. The budget, very, very interesting. Now, for anybody who may have seen this film already or at least seen the trailers to Fantasy Island, before I get into the synopsis of the film, it's set on an island, and there's a massive, massive hotel. Well, actually, no, it's like a resort thing that's living there. So it's a big, massive building with many different sets. The budget was only $7 million. Now that's quite amazing, because it's cheap as chips, and the box office so far, as of this review, is $33.8 million. Now, obviously, a film like this is going to make its money from the audience that it was intended for, being all ages. Now, I'll get to why I say that in a minute, because technically it's kind of a horror film, but it's kind of not. But the fact that it was so cheap made it of course it's going to make its money back. And the fact that it's made $33.8 million is definitely not going to be up there with Avengers Endgame or Joker, but that's not bad considering the type of film it is. Anyway, the premise. Alrighty. A group of idiots are all drawn together to Fantasy Island after each winning some online contest. The magical, fantastical island is able to grant each guest one fantasy, and they must play out no matter how bad it turns out, which obviously they turn into nightmares. That's about it. So, let's see what I've written down for this film. So, where did I put it? Okay, so Fantasy Island is everything I expected it to be. Now, produced by Blumhouse and written by Jeff Wadlow, starring Lucy Hale. It's got all of the ingredients to make a perfect PG, non-violent, all-ages horror film, essentially. But this isn't really a horror. There's not a lot of scary elements to it. There are horror themes, but it's not really horror. It is more of a mystery. It's more of it's like a light beer mystery thriller, if that's what you want to call it. And there's a few twists and turns that happen throughout that are a bit kind of like on the nose, especially the last one involving Lucy Hale's character. But it's got all the ingredients to make a PG horror film, as I said. People die. You don't see really how they die. There's a lot of guns. There's gun violence in there, but you never really see anybody get shot. People get stabbed. You don't really see that either. But that's the thing about these films. Just like the other film that Jeff Wadlow directed called Truth or Dare, which in itself isn't a bad film. It's just like a Fantasy Island. It follows an interesting concept, and it conveys it in a fun PG way. That's exactly what it, expect for a film like this. If you're looking for a hardcore horror film, Fantasy Island, or Truth or Dare for that matter, isn't for you. Truth or Dare, I would think, is definitely more of a horror because that's got some creepy imagery. It's based on sort of a poltergeisty kind of thing. This film is literally just an island which has some kind of mystical rock embedded in between it that can grant each person who goes there one fantasy, and it has to play out. It just so happens to be at this particular time, all of these people are connected in a Very strange way. Let's have a look here. Elaborate scheme to bring all the characters together who are partly responsible for the death of a young man. All of their fantasies combine and turn into nightmares in a way that kind of push them, or punish them, sorry. But did any of them really deserve it? We don't really know, because the death of the young man that we see, it's explained in like a 5-minute clip, and it just shows that they were kind of all there. But if they really wanted to include people who were directly involved, you think there'd be 100 other more people. But the reason that they're all drawn together, it's not based on any sort of contest. They were all drawn together by the person who was dating the young man, and it's kind of it's silly. It is very silly. But this film isn't supposed to be next level, blow your mind storytelling, deep and meaningful thoughts. It's just supposed to be a bit of fun. And that's all this movie is. So I will say the movie is fun, but it definitely isn't great. That's for sure. If I have to give it a pretzel rating out of a square 10, I'd probably give it a 4, and that's being generous. If I have to rate this out of 10 pretzels, I'd eat 4 of them. Out of my personal rating, though, as people who've been listening to the show previously, I've got 3 levels, essentially. I've got 4 levels. I've got dog shit, I've got just crap, and then I've got good and then great. And this sort of fits in between the crap and good sort of section. Now, I don't think this film is going to go down as anything spectacular. It does definitely leave a lot of sequel bait at the very end, where it does lead into the main characters. For those who would be familiar with Fantasy Island, the original version anyway, I won't spoil too much in that regard for you, but overall, if you're looking for a very light way to fill in your weekend, and if you've literally got nothing else on and you want to go to the movies, I'd say see it. But otherwise, you're not missing much if you don't. And that's been my review of Fantasy Island. I know it's not too in-depth, I've got nobody to bounce off here, but hey, you get what you're given. Anyway, I think that's about it for the podcast. You can find 2c3pod on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all at 2c3pod. Now, make sure, though, you're listening to our podcast on your preferred platform: Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and, of course, YouTube, Big Summer Blowout. If you do want to support the show as well, of course, we can head over to tpublic.com, where you can find some stickers. You can find a t-shirt if you really want to. You can find a mug, even a fucking fridge magnet if you really want to. But otherwise, you can certainly join our Patreon as well, which is currently up and running still. A few affordable tiers. Check out what you're getting them and see if you like anything there. Otherwise, just chuck us a buck straight through PayPal at 2company3podcast@gmail.com. If you, however, are interested in starting your own podcast, and if you're looking for somebody to produce it for you, if you don't want to go through buying all the gear and learning how to use it, because it can be quite expensive and time-consuming, hit me up at 2company3podcast@gmail.com. I'm more than happy to collaborate with you on how to produce your very own podcast, including YouTube clips. Now, we've got 2 podcasts every Wednesday and every Friday. So that's 2 episodes every week and 4 videos every week. Now, this week we're going to be 1 short, but don't worry. The 3 videos will certainly be up on YouTube. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. My name is Dylan. This is Two's Company, and you are the podcast.
Thanks for tuning into that video by Two's Company Freezer Podcast. Don't be sad though, there's plenty more where that came from. Another cheeky video right there. Maybe even hit that subscribe button and ring that bell. Or, if you don't like our faces, check us out on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube.